Hey everybody, I'm Shibuya Gato, and this is not my usual style of video. If you're familiar with this channel, you know that I stick more to uploading stream VODs and casual podcasts than any kind of pre-recorded, scripted analysis. But a new Neo The World Ends With You trailer came out, and I mean, look at my Twitter. There is no way I wasn't going to talk about this thing. Speaking of talking about it, my friend BioRoxas actually did a video covering some of the game's combat, the menus, some of the equipped stuff. I will leave a link to that in the description below, and I'll have an information box pop up about here if I can figure out how to set that up. Worst case, if I can't, it's still in the description. Anyway, since he covered more of the combat-oriented stuff, I'm gonna use this video to look at three major aspects shown off in the trailer that are not combat. The gameplay, the style, and the story. Don't worry, I'll drop a spoiler warning before I get anywhere really specific, because I am going to be doing a lot of speculation and doing way too much reading into details in this trailer. And along the way, I will be talking spoilers for the original game, so this is your warning. If you have not played the original World Ends With You, do that, read the secret reports, play A New Day, and then come back to this video. Well, without any further ado, let's check out the gameplay.
That's how it's done.
Since this game is actually being designed for a home console release, unlike the original World Ends With You, which was designed for the DS, we're actually getting a peek at how a fully realized 3D Shibuya will look. This trailer shows Rindo running through 6 different areas outside of combat, and I'm going to do my best to pinpoint the ones that aren't that obvious, using some of the combat backgrounds from the original DS game. These were ripped onto Spriter's Resource by Night Owl 35, and they are probably the best source of info for this that I have found, so thank you very much. The first 2 areas are pretty straightforward. Rindo is just running through the Scramble Crossing and the Statue of Hachiko areas, and the Hachiko area looks way more fleshed out in 3D than it ever did in the original game. But there's still a pretty clear divide between Hachiko and the Scramble Crossing. And what this probably means is that despite the technical upgrade we're getting, we will not have a seamless open world in Neo, The World Ends With You, which is fine by me. You need to have walls, you need to have missions that are locked off, and how else are we supposed to get that sweet Neo Reaper review? The third area is much harder to place, but I'm pretty sure that it's part of the West Exit bus terminal. If you're not familiar with that area by name alone, it happens to be the area with the infamous Moyai statue. Not Moai, Moyai. Rindo seems to be running across a bridge, but it is still underneath an overpass of some kind. Now, since the sky is clearly visible, and given the lack of graffiti around the place, I don't think this would be the Miyashita Park underpass. I think it's going to be this area on the top screen here. The shape of the building in the back actually lines up fairly well, and the traffic signs would make sense if this is an area with really heavy bus traffic. The fourth area is tricky, because it actually shows off part of the Shibuya River running above ground. We don't actually get anything like that in the original World Ends With You, but the fact that this is a nicer part of Shibuya, with some outdoor seating for cafes and stuff, makes me think this is a part of Cat Street. By the way, I really hope Hanekoma and Wildcat are both in this game. I want Rindo and his crew to interact with them. I want to see how Hanekoma reacts to things. I just want him back, please. Please, Square Enix, give me back my man. The fifth area is actually much easier to figure out, just generally. It's probably Dogenzaka. The street being at an angle, the camera's position being pulled out relative to Rindo, and the way the shops are all lined up are kind of a perfect fit. It's pretty easy to see here. There's also a familiar looking ramen place, which has me craving a good bowl of ramen right now. The last location we get to see outside of battle is a stairway. Considering that it's surrounded by trees, and considering that you can see Tower Records in the back, right there in the top left, this is probably just Miyashita Park itself. We only ever see the stairs here at one angle in combat, and it's a weird top-down angle. So it is nice to get another view of the place as Rindo. There is also some text blocking the screen, but do not worry about that. We'll get there later when we cover story. For now, we're moving on to the second piece of analysis I'm going to be doing. The style.
That's how it's done.
Okay, style is kind of a broad term, I know, but even in The World Ends With You, style dictates a lot about the gameplay, the characters, and helps to foreshadow a lot of big things. So we're gonna look at some clothes, damn it. Here's a fun fact about the original game. It has 13 unique brands of pins and clothes, and of those 13 brands, 12 of them are actually representative of animals in the Chinese zodiac. Those brands are Musratus, D&B, Tigre Punks, Lapin Angelique, Dragon Couture, Hip Snake, Pegaso, Sheep Heavenly, Jupiter of the Monkey, Pavo Real, Natural Puppy, and Wild Boar. The last brand is Gatito, and since this is used for more plot-relevant pins like the player pin, Red Skull, Lefty Cat, Righty Cat, Brainy Cat, it's the only major outlier in this pattern, but, you know, since it's more story original stuff, we can forgive it. Since Neo The World Ends With You takes place 3 years after the original game, and since Shibuya is a big hub for fashion, trends are constantly changing. To reflect that, it seems like the developers and the designers actually have swapped out some of these old brands for new ones that do keep the animal motif, but mix up some of the theming. So, Musratus seems to be replaced with a new brand called Topo Topo. Lapin Angelique is swapped out for Coney X Coney. Hip Snake is now Gara Gara. Pegaso has become Il Cavallo del Re, which, if my Italian is right, I believe means the horse of the gods. Sheep Heavenly has become a supreme-looking wannabe called Shepherd House. Pavo Real is being traded out for Monocro, which is a much more minimalistic, less gaudy style. And Wild Boar has just become Hogfang. The only 3 brands that we know have not been changed at all are actually Jupiter of the Monkey, Tigre Punks, and Natural Puppy. And coincidentally, 2 of those brands are actually worn by major characters from the last game. Jupiter of the Monkey being worn by Neku, and Natural Puppy being worn by Joshua. As for D&B, Dragon Couture, and Gatito, we really don't know yet. I doubt Gatito is getting replaced, since that is the game's unique brand for player pins and for all of that stuff, but there is no way to tell until we see the full game or until we get a trailer featuring it. Each member of the Wicked Twisters also seems to have a unique brand that they prefer to wear, which is the same as the main characters of the original game. Neko and Joshua I've already explained, but Shiki really preferred D&B, and Beat very much enjoyed wearing Wild Boar. Rindo is pretty easy to pick out since he literally is wearing a Jupiter the Monkey hoodie in all of his art, but the other 3 are a little bit trickier. Minamimoto's full outfit was actually obtainable in the original game, but it was all listed under the Gatito brand. Since he's wearing new clothes here, I'm thinking that they might belong to another brand entirely. My best guess for that would actually be Tigre Punks, since his boss noise form is a lion, a big cat. But other than that, I literally have no evidence to base this on, so take it with a grain of salt. Nagi is also kind of tricky, but my personal bet for her is Topo Topo, the Musradish replacement. There's actually a hat that gets shown off in the trailer that specifically gives her a level 2 defense boost. And her more laid-back, casual style would not be that weird for a much more accessible, laid-back brand. Now, Fred is much trickier, actually. It's clear that he enjoys fashion and that he's got a very unique sense of style, what with the unbuttoned vest, the bright red plaid pants, the necklace, the earrings. But the only actual hint we get in the trailer is a single pair of cropped pants that give him a basic attack boost. The problem with this is that these are also the Topo Topo brand, which I just brought up for Nagi. While these specific pants might gel with him, I don't think that he's going to be content just wearing the TWEWY equivalent of Old Navy the way that Nagi is. I could see him preferring a more expensive brand like El Caballo del Rey, but the only reason I'm even saying that is because he has a pin equipped from that brand. I don't really know for certain yet. Until we get more info, there's no way to really know. Which is fine, because enough talk about clothes. TWEWY isn't just about the clothes, you know. It's also about the real shit. The pins. The pins for each specific brand actually have unique psychs among them, and they let you use special attacks during combat. Bio covered some of the specifics of the combat itself, and some of the attributes that the pins seem to have now, but a neat thing that these games will do is raising or lowering your pin's attack power based on how popular they are in that specific part of Shibuya. Each area has its own unique brand chart, with the 13 brands ranked, and the top 3 will get a decent power boost, while the least popular one gets its attack strength halved. While I was going through the trailer, I actually noticed something in the short cutscene before you start battle. As the camera pans across the wicked twisters, you can see a few billboards in the back for just a couple seconds. And what's on them? Oh, look at that! Brands! Now, there's no real way to know if this is showing you which of the brands are popular or unpopular in the area, but given that there are 3 or 4 different sizes of billboard, 3 or 4 brands being shown, and that 4 brands are buffed or debuffed at any time in a given area, this feels very intentional. The 3 bigger brand names in the back are Hogfang, Natural Puppy, and Monocro, while the smallest one there, right down there, is Garu Garu. Even if this is just an aesthetic choice, it's a really good one, considering that the original game would also swap out ads in certain areas like 10-4, depending on which brand was number 1 at any given time. Oh, and speaking pins, one last thing. The unbranded starter pins that Neku uses at the start, it looks like they're back too. In the menu, you can actually see that one of Rindo's currently recommended pins is the Shockwave pin, which is the first slash pin that Neku gets to use in the beginning of The World Ends With You. Hopefully they bring back the rest of the set as well, because those designs are so good. I love them so much. Okay, now that we've talked about gameplay, and then we've talked about style, I need to scratch the surface on this game's story, because there is way too much in this trailer for what it is. I plan on overanalyzing the hell out of everything that is shown here, and speculating on where this plot might go. So if you want to skip that and go straight to the end of the video, here is the time on screen. Be warned. Otherwise, we're gonna start story in 3, 2, 1.
Are you ready? That's how it's done.
Okay, so I'm gonna be real with you. If you are still watching at this point, A, thank you. B, I'm going to assume that you've at least read up on The Original World Ends With You, A New Day, which is the epilogue added to the final remix version on Switch, and all of the secret reports. When I say all, I mean every single one. I'm not going to be doing any kind of recap here. This is an analysis of the Neo video, not a what you need to know from World Ends With You video. If you need a refresher, please pause now, take some time to go through the wiki, or load up your old copy. Read through it. Refresh your memory. People say that Kingdom Hearts lore is infamous for its depth and its complexity. I say that in quotes because it really wasn't all that complex until the recent games, and even then, if you played all the games and paid attention, you basically knew most of what was happening. But I digress. Despite KH being infamous for that, The World Ends With You actually gives it a run for its money with the secret reports. It's very funny. Alright, caught up? Good. So, for the sake of ease, I'm gonna cover the plot beats in this trailer as they appear, so chronologically. That way it's easier for me to write, it's easier for you to follow. If you have the trailer open, you can follow along. And we can save that juicy stinger for the end like it deserves. So, why don't we go ahead and start at the beginning? We open on a shot of Rindo looking down at his hand. We don't know if he's staring at the pin we see him with, or if he's maybe staring down at a timer, like previous members of the Reaper's game had. It's probably safe to say, given what we see later, that he's looking down at the pin, but I thought that I should mention the alternative, considering that the timer is iconic imagery, and it would be smart of them to continue using it in Neo. So after this shot, we get some footage of Rindo running through the Scramble, past Hachiko, iconic locations in both the Shibuya of real life and the Shibuya of The World Ends With You. He clenches the new pin in his hand, and it begins to glow. Now from what I'm seeing, and from what I know of noise pins in the original game, I think the symbol on this pin looks kind of like a dragon's head. You can see some horns on top, you see a long snout coming down towards the bottom, and all of the major noise bosses in the first game actually cover different animals. Ox, lion, tiger, and snake. And actually, looking at it, Kitaniji's final form was actually a dragon noise, but that was only after he absorbed the powers of Shiki, Beat, and Joshua himself. Maybe this is a pin he left behind after being defeated by Neku at the end of the last game? Only time will tell, but I do think that it's interesting that this has such a striking resemblance. The next few shots show us Rindo running through more of Shibuya, and just before we get the first title card drop, we see some text flash on the screen. Only the possibility of you can change our fate. Remember this text. We will come back to it later. During the initial character introductions and splash screens, there are cutscenes from the game that are playing in the background of each of them. These cutscenes can tell us a lot about certain moments. For instance, Rindo's background cutscene has him talking to Sugumi, aka Hype-chan, if you've been in this fanbase long enough. He's pretty stressed out, and he actually says that we can't leave this game without him, which might imply that either Fret or Sho get lost near the end of the week. Pretty straightforward, and it's a good way of establishing that Rindo is a very loyal guy. Fret's cutscene actually seems to show something very early on in the game. So Fret and Rindo are having a discussion, and Rindo talks about how he hasn't understood a single thing since Fret picked up those creepy pins. And Fret mentions that he's never heard of a game where you see sounds or whatever, which, if I had to guess, probably alludes to the player pin's ability to scan and read RG residents' thoughts. This actually leads into a fan theory I've seen going around, and I'm going to work as if this fan theory is true because I think it has potential. The fan theory is that Rindo and Fret accidentally stumble into the game as living people, which is very interesting as a premise, given that this was Joshua's cover story in the original, and given that that was expressly forbidden in the Reaper's game of 3 years ago. Seeing how two living people would get through a game made specifically for the dead is a pretty interesting premise for a sequel, honestly. I think that's a good way for them to do it. Nagi's cutscene doesn't really show us much about the main story, it just more gives us insight into her as a character. The main sprite shown off on the screen is her falling and seeming to try and cast some kind of jutsu from Naruto to get herself out of trouble. It's cute, it shows us that she's kind of a geek, kind of a klutz, and sets the tone for her characterization very well. The cutscene in the back also shows that she is a huge fan of somebody, but we don't get to see who. She only ever refers to his lordship, but we don't have any real names to go off of, so whether this is Agioji, the Prince of Anui, which I doubt, or somebody else, we'll just have to wait and see. And my personal theory about Nagi is that she is the member of the Wicked Twisters that's focused on the least, because she is the one who is actually dead and participating in the Reaper's game. If she is dead, and she partners with Rindo and Fret at the start, it gives them a clear tie to the Reaper's game, and it gives them, and thus the audience, someone who can teach them how things work in the UG, in this new underground of 3 years after The World Ends With You initially ended. And then there's Sho Minamimoto, local math freak and resurrected Reaper. Interestingly, none of his sprites or key art actually show him with Reaper wings. It leads me to believe that he might be stuck in this game as a dead human. And if that's the case, it would be interesting to see how he adjusts to being a human again after having acquired the power of the taboo noise back in the first game. Minamimoto's background scene also seems to imply that he's instigating a fight, which might be using his brash nature to play off of Rindo, Fret, and Nagi and initiate a combat tutorial for them, since I don't believe any of those three would pick a fight if they can help it. Rindo, Fret, Nagi, and Sho make up the first team that we see in this new Reapers game, the Wicked Twisters, which is a very nice nod to the original theme song of The Worlds of the U1. From there, we get a shot of Susukichi, who is a very big dude, and also a Reaper. He's introduced outside of either the Shibuya or the Shinjuku Reaper groups, and he seems to be mocking Fret and Rindo in the cutscene. So I'm thinking maybe he might be a referee of sorts, or maybe he's just an asshole who decided to play the game as a Reaper. Maybe he won the game previously, and his wish was just to come back as a Reaper to cause more chaos. There's no real way to know. And then her, Tsugumi. The only teaser that we had for a sequel for years before Final Remix came out, and before Neo got formally announced. The cutscene behind her seems to show that upon meeting Rindo for what I'm guessing is the first time, she just attacks him with her Mr. Mew. And funnily enough, she seems to use Mr. Mew in the same way that Shiki did, as kind of a conduit for her psych attacks. The fact that Susukichi and Tsugumi seem to be wild cards of a sort in this Reaper's game, you know, a Reaper and the literal sole survivor of the Shinjuku inversion, and the fact that they're on a team specifically called the Ruin Bringers, leads me to wonder what exactly their endgame is. Why would they pair up? Why is Tsugumi openly hostile towards Rindo initially? What the hell is Susukichi's just general deal? We get a glimpse of three other teams who seem to be mostly represented by their leaders. We have Fuya, who represents the Deep River Society, Kanon for the Varia Beauties, and Matoi for the Pure Hearts. Honestly, we don't learn much about them from the cutscene dialogue in the back, and the only real glimpse into any of their characters that we get is that Fuya seems to be holding a map of Shibuya in his sprites. So maybe he was a tourist and got stuck here after a vacation gone wrong. Kanon and Matoi we don't know much about, but it's safe to say that they're going to be recurring characters in this game, so it'll be interesting to see their dynamics just generally with your team. Kadia and Izuki aren't actually shown interacting with each other at all in this, so it's unknown if Izuki actually got that promotion that she had been aiming for in the original game. But the implication that she's been a Reaper for at least 15 years is really interesting. And Kadia actually is acting much more friendly towards Rindo and Fret in his cutscene than you would expect. I'm interested to see specifically how the Reaper player dynamic has changed since the events of the original game. And I want to see if Kadia and Uzuki have also had a change in their dynamic in the past 3 years. Also, can I just say their new outfits? I love them. I love them both. Kadia and Uzuki are great. They're some of my favorite parts of the original game. I just love them so much. And you know who I don't love? Coco. Now, I don't blame you if you do. I get her appeal. But Coco, in this game, seems to be a bit of an enigma. Given that she's the one who brought Minamimoto back to life in A New Day, and given that she did so that he could play a game with Neku as his partner, we don't actually know what her motives are or how they've changed since A New Day. And underneath her new fairy princess exterior, she seems to also show the hostility that she held in A New Day when she doesn't get her way. This act, I don't buy it. I know that she's going to have ulterior motives, she's going to threaten anybody who gets in her way, and that's just how it is going to be. It's also interesting to see that she is one of only 3 named Reapers left in the original Shibuya crew. So it's going to be interesting to see that dynamic as well, if she plays off of Kadia and Uzuki. Now, the game is set in Shibuya, but considering that Shinjuku kind of stopped existing at the end of A New Day, it makes sense that there would be Reaper refugees living here now. Shiba is one of those refugees, who seems to hold similar beliefs to Joshua at the start of The World Ends With You. You know, given that he is calling the people sheeple, and seems to be a little bit more vain and entitled with the butterfly motif. And, you know, potential noise form, but there's no way to know that until we see it. Despite this, though, the dialogue in his cutscene is him feeling sorry that he has to call a match null and void against the Twisters. This dialogue also seems to imply that somebody is cheating in this game, or at the very least somebody is framing the wicked Twisters. I'm curious to see more of that. Kubo, meanwhile, is very much enjoying taunting the players. We don't get much of an insight to him beyond that, though, besides his insane expressions in his sprites. He also is carrying a small handbag of some kind, though the pattern is hard to make out since it's blocked by other things. This might be a hint towards his final noise form, but there's no way to be sure. Though he might also just be like Uzuki and Kadia in the original, where he doesn't have a final noise form because he is a lower-ranked Reaper. Ayano is neat. I like her a lot. She probably has a lizard kind of form, given that she has a literal iguana on her shoulder, and a Hawaiian shirt, which tropical climates are better for lizards, in case you didn't know. And the cutscene in the back shows that she seems to have a close relationship with Shoka, the Reaper in the Mr. Mew hoodie. Maybe they're sisters. I mean, they have a little bit of a resemblance, what with the hair and the lipstick, so I can see that. It would be interesting to get the dynamic of a sibling pair who died in the Reapers game, and both chose to be Reapers. Though, they could also just be a found family type situation where they found each other afterwards in the game and have no relation by blood, but have chosen to remain close despite that. Kaie is really neat. I don't know how to pronounce his name, but he looks great. I'm very excited to see the nonsense that they pull with him being the silent type who just uses his phone to talk. The cutscene in the back of him, Fret, and Rindo all being together within like 3 feet of each other, but all on their phones, is very cute and very fitting for a modern-day portrayal of Shibuya. And his rabbit imagery leads me to believe that he might actually have a rabbit noise form, which could be interesting. But I also don't think that he's much of a type who'd want to be a GM. So, only time will tell with that. Next is Hishima, who is very much a stoic, more responsible type in the UG. Almost like a less fun Kitaniji. He is very much a proponent of respecting the game's rules, and he doesn't want to, quote, take the fun out of the game for the players. There's not any major indicators of an animal in his design, so he might be another lower-ranked Reaper on the food chain. Last in the Shinjuku Reapers is Shoka, and her Mr. Mew hoodie that caused a riot when it was first revealed. People have been theorizing what this could mean for a while now, but I actually noticed something in a recent replay of The World Ends With You that might explain it. So, when I was going back through week 1, I noticed that Shiki actually has a line very early on that she is so familiar with Shibuya because, quote, I come here all the time. So maybe she was from out of town and she just visited the big city often. Maybe she was from Shinjuku. Maybe she made it big and designed a line of Mr. Mew merch. Plushies, hoodies, with Eri. This might explain why both Shoka and Tsugumi have connections to Mr. Mew himself. In the back, she has dialogue where she sees that Rindo and Fred are able to use Sykes, and she actually gets them registered for the game initially. So, it's curious to see her filling a more secretarial role of just making sure that things run smoothly behind the scenes, making sure that things are going alright, and not necessarily the role of an active Harrier Reaper. It's going to be curious to see how this plays out, especially given that we know she and Ayano have this close relationship. Maybe Ayano didn't want her participating in the game too actively, out of fear that she would be erased. Once we get the full lineup of the displaced Shinjuku Reapers, And once we get past the actual gameplay footage, we get a couple of cutscenes, full screen. The first one is Shoka explaining that the only way to escape the game is to come in first. So, does this mean that players don't get erased anymore? Because the word escape is leading me to believe that people can get stuck in the UG the way Neku was if they can't get their team up in the ranks. This would play off of the teamwork aspect that the Reaper's game was initially supposed to hold up and uplift. Because if you have teams fighting each other, then these teams will grow stronger as a result, and people's bonds will be more solidified, potentially. The scene after this is Suzukichi taunting Fret, Rindo, and Nagi about the Twisters being in dead last on the leaderboard. God, what an asshole. From there, it cuts to a scene of Rindo receiving what looks like a mission on his phone. And I'm happy that they have not ditched the original mission structure, despite changing up the format of the Reaper's game quite a bit. Even if the missions are as simple as, take down the team that's at number 1. And here is where things get interesting. Nagi and Rindo are having an argument over a pin that she was not able to get. And in the middle of this scenario, which feels like the bad end of a visual novel, Rindo says that he feels like he's having deja vu. A menu then pops up showing a specific time and location. In this case, there's only one, and it's Tipsy Toes Hall at 1300, or 1 p.m. if you don't use a 24-hour clock. And I want to talk about this because this opens up the potential for one day to have multiple points where things can be changed, and I'm very excited for that. Anyway, Tipsy Toes Hall, 1300, a button appears that says, "Change our fate." Sound familiar? Well, maybe it's because of that text we saw at the beginning. Only the possibility of you can change our fate. Rindo is literally doing this right now, changing fate by going back in time during the day. The opening blurb at the start seems to imply that Rindo's ability to travel back is going to be crucial to our fate. Maybe our means Shibuya as a whole? And maybe that means that Rindo is key to avoiding a Shibuya inversion, like the inversion of Shinjuku 3 years ago. I think that the possibility of you part of that line is probably referring to Rindo's best possible self, as in the Rindo that helps enough people and makes the right choices throughout the week. The ideal Rindo. I'm also curious to see if Rindo's power is actually going to be time travel, or if it's just, a kind of foresight into potential bad ends for certain days based on your choices. Because we know that visions of events that are happening in real time are a thing that people can receive. Neku literally saw visions of Tsugumi in Shinjuku in A New Day. But seeing things that are happening concurrently with you, and seeing things that are happening due to your choices in the future, are two wildly different things. Maybe the theory that Rindo and Fret are alive is why Rindo has this kind of power. After Rindo changes fate, we get to see the good ending to the day play out. Nagi is grateful for the pin, crying, saying that she owes him, and we cut to the next scene. Karia is telling the Wicked Twisters that they've got some pretty big shoes to fill here in Shibuya. It's very clear that he is referring to Neku here. Nobody has made nearly as much of an impact on the UG as he did 3 years ago. But if you had any doubts that he's talking about Neku, the next scene literally cuts to Fret mentioning that Suzy K brought up a Neku. Now, Suzy K is probably his demeaning name for Suzukichi, which, the guy deserves it. He's an ass. But this brings up a big question. Suzukichi was not in the original game. How does he know about Neku when Neku has been dead since A New Day 3 years prior to Neo? Are there legends about the kid who saved Shibuya? Did he defect from the Shibuya Reapers and decide to join the game on a whim? Did Joshua and Hanekoma tell him something? Or maybe there's something a little more sinister going on, and because of that he is aware of Neku's existence. The last scene in this trailer is a full 3D cutscene, and it covers a lot. So, Tsugumi is aiming a psychic blast at Rindo and his friends, saying, quote, "I have orders." Orders from who? And why is she specifically fixated on getting rid of Rindo? Before she can do anything more, a hooded figure walks towards her, and she looks shocked for a second, maybe even a little scared. The figure keeps walking and plants itself between Tsugumi and the kids, and she changes her aim, saying target acquired. And then Rindo drops the bomb. Rindo confirms that this hooded figure is Neku. And we see him launch himself towards Tsugumi at full speed, using some of his psychs before the trailer cuts to black. Now, there are some interesting tidbits about Neku in this last scene, and they might help to shed light on why he's here and what exactly is up with him. Though, again, these are nothing but theories. Please take them with a grain of salt. I'm just using what we see in the trailer and what we see in art to piece something together. So, Neku's new outfit. It's this seemingly red and black jacket, this coat, and on the game's box art, we don't actually see much of it. We just see him holding his ears, staring off into the distance, as if he's longing for the headphones he used to have. But if we take Shoka off of the box art and isolate Neku, his outfit has a bone on it. This bone might be a nod to how he was offed at the end of A New Day. He also is wearing a mask, and, Nomura said when Rindo's design was first revealed that he designed these characters before the pandemic hit, so I don't think it's because of that. I actually have a theory as to why he's wearing the mask, and why he's a blonde now instead of a redhead. My theory is that Hanekoma or Joshua tried to bring him back after the end of A New Day, but they weren't able to fully reassemble the pieces of his soul when he was killed. He might be mostly Neku, same thoughts, same general body, but there's a chance that he's not entirely the same person he was at the end of the last game. I think that underneath the mask, he might not be fully there physically, or he may have a little bit of noise form still built in. Another big thing with this is that just before he jumps out of frame at the end of the trailer, you can see that there is a design on the bottom of his coat in the back. We don't see anything in the box art, but this design seems to be reminiscent of Noise designs. Just a little bit. Or maybe it's reminiscent of Reaper designs. Maybe he was turned into a Reaper to help get around the fact that he wasn't allowed to participate in any more games officially. Maybe. And then there is the matter of his red and black jacket. The fact that he's wearing this instead of his usual Jupiter of the Monkey garb make me think that he was hiding out with Hanekoma for all of this time, trying to lay low in Shibuya. After all, the red and black on the jacket very much match the colors of the red skull pin and a lot of the colors that Cat uses in his graffiti. Given that Hanekoma was able to restore Rhyme shortly after she was erased in the first game, even if it was just in the form of a noise, I think that with enough time and enough willpower, he potentially could have done the same to Neku. Now, he says in the secret report for A New Day 3 that he was only able to save Beat from being erased. But, given that Neku is here in this trailer, it's clear that somebody managed what even he claimed he couldn't. Whether that's him, whether that's Joshua, whether that might be a third party, we'll have to wait and see. And I'm very excited that we finally have a release date for this game, so I know when I have to wait for. God, that was a lot to cover. If you've actually stayed this long, thank you very much. I've been a fan of The World Ends View since about 2010, so actually getting to talk about this ahead of the sequel after so many years of waiting is kind of nuts. If you want to see more good TWEWY content, consider checking out my streams, where I'm replaying Final Remix at the moment, so people who can't get their hands on the original game, or people who haven't played it in a hot minute, can get a refresher before Neo comes out. I'm going to be doing A New Day, Another Day, the secret reports, all that good stuff. if you want to know when I go live, I actually have a Discord that you can join, which is linked in the description. I drop ads in there whenever I go live on Twitch, so you can get notified. Or, if you want to get notified in a less direct way, or just, see me post about how much I love Karia and Uzuki's redesigns, consider checking out my Twitter, @Shibuya-Gato. You saw it at the beginning. I'm not used to the whole outro thing, but thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you soon.